After taxes per month, you get about Australian dollars a month.
I always used to think, damn, man, Australia has these weird animals, weird insects. How would I deal? Like, I don't want to live like in my house, a snake coming in, or my house is full of spiders. Like,
My experience with AMC Clinical was not very fond. If you're off or if you're off call and you're done with your duty, you're off.
hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And this is Dr. Supavrabnani, and we have another episode of the MEM podcast. And today we'll be discussing a life of an international medical graduate or a life of a doctor in Australia. And to discuss that, today we have Dr. Divij Sharma with us, who is a junior training doctor in Australia, and he'll be telling us about everything, how to get there as an Indian or as an international medical graduate, and what's life out there in Australia. So let's welcome Dr. Divij Sharma.
Thanks for the delightful introduction, Subha. That was really impressive. Yes, I'm happy to be here, and we've been in talks about this for very long, and I'm happy to share and go
Yeah.
by step play down of my journey, of the exams, not just the exams, but the pathway there, the specialty training there, the lifestyle there, and the most important part, the
Yeah.
money over there.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we'll keep the money part later. Let's first discuss how to get there, and then we'll discuss how much money you can make there. So, how to get there? So, I understand there are different pathways an international medical graduate like yourself or someone watching from the audience can take to, get to practice medicine in Australia. So, what are these different pathways?
Right. So, as a medical student, a graduate or intern, there are basically three pathways which you need to be aware of. Okay. The first one is the standard pathway, which is to the AMC route, which I went through and which through most the IMG or international medical doctors go through. The second is
Okay.
the competent pathway or the PLAB pathway, where people who have given PLAB exams, they go to the UK, they work there in the UK for 1 year, and that gives them a route to automatically apply for this competent pathway to go and work in Australia, bypassing the AMC examinations, both part 1 and part 2. And a lot of junior doctors,
Perfect.
senior doctors have also been employing that. The third pathway, which is the least favored and the most notoriously difficult one, is the SIMG pathway or Specialist
Okay.
International Medical Graduate pathway. This is for doctors who
Perfect.
have their home country residency in whichever country or in whichever field, let's say medicine, obs and gynae or surgery, and they have at least 2 or 3 years of SRship experience or a consultant experience back in home country. This makes them eligible to apply for this SIMG pathway as a senior registrar or even a junior consultant in Australia, bypassing the AMC examinations. In some fields, you may have to give at least one step of exam, let's say in OBS and Gynae. Even if you go via the SIMG pathway, it may warrant you to give the Australian Medical Council exams, but that is also a pathway there.
Okay. So, as I understand, to follow any of these three pathways, you need to be a graduate. You cannot do it, or you cannot start any of these pathways while you're a medical student, or am I wrong?
No, that's completely right. So, bang on, Subhav, you cannot employ or get onto any of these pathways as a medical student. All of this journey starts during internship. Even
Okay.
preparing for these exams, or signing up for an exam starts during your internship period.
Okay. So, the first pathway was like, just to recap, the first one was the AMC pathway. The second one was something bypassing the AMC, like a competent pathway, right? Okay, and the third one is a specialist pathway. Okay, so I just want to dive deeper into this second one to gain some more clarity. How do you bypass this AMC exam in the second pathway? Like in the third pathway, I understand you are a specialist, you have consultant or specialist experience, and that maybe lets you get rid of the AMC exam. What about the second pathway? What do you have that you don't need to take the AMC?
Okay, so there are two subsections also of the second or the competent pathway, and there has been a recent update onto this pathway. So I'll talk about two sections under this pathway. The first one is you give PLAB 1 and PLAB 2. You get a job in the
Okay.
UK via this Natural Track Jobs website. You work there for a year. To become eligible to apply for a job in Australia via the competent pathway, which will allow you to bypass AMC exams, both one and two, these are two prerequisites: being GMC registered, which means PLAB 1 and PLAB 2. Second is having 1 year of experience in that country, having 1 year of experience as an FI2 or a junior clinical fellow in that country. After you've done that, and after
Okay.
you've signed them off, and after you have documentation of that, you can automatically apply for junior jobs, or let's say mid-grade jobs in Australia as a resident or a registrar. That is one pathway, bypassing
Okay.
both the exams, AMC1 and AMC2.
Okay.
Now there's another subsection to it, and this has been a recent update, and I've been getting a lot of queries on this. So another way to bypass this one part of AMC exam, which is AMC clinical, which is a very difficult exam in terms of very low pass rates and a bit higher standards for reasons best known. In that way, what you can do is you give PLAB 1, you give AMC 1, you give PLAB 2, and with AMC 1, you are eligible to apply for jobs in Australia with English competency
Okay.
as well. So let's say you've given PLAB 1 and you have Australia as a backup, you've given AMC 1, you've given PLAB 2, you're not having good luck with applying for jobs in the UK. So by virtue of having AMC 1 and by virtue of having PLAB 1 and PLAB 2, which makes you GMC registered, you can get a job in Australia with AMC 1. And just because you were GMC registered or you had that PLAB 1 and PLAB 2, you can bypass that AMC clinical examination and directly get general registration.
Okay, but why would I need AMC1 also? Because as you said, so that you don't need this 1 year experience in this.
You need that 1 year experience, you
In
can
this
do it in
one.
Australia.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So the two sections would be like either you have PLAB 1, PLAB 2 GMC registration plus 1 year experience, then you can come into Australia.
Yes.
And the second one would be you have PLAB 1, PLAB 2 GMC and AMC 1, and you can come into without having that 1 year experience, which you just get it in
In
Australia
Australia.
instead.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, okay, okay. So the three pathways, the first one AMC, the second one competent pathway, in which we discussed the two subsections, and the third one was the SIMG, or the Specialist International Medical Graduate pathway.
That's right.
Okay, so we discussed the pathways. What pathway did you use, or are you currently in? Tell us about your story.
Right. So I went to the standard conventional pathway, which is the standard pathway, doing both AMC1 and AMC2 examinations. Straight fresh out of my internship, I gave my AMC1, passed in first go, gave my English competency. So over here, there's a catch again. As in the PLAB route, you require to give your English competency first in order to become eligible to give PLAB
Yeah.
exams. Whereas in AMC, you need to
Yeah.
give English competency after AMC1, because the validity is just for 2 years. And when you get APRA registered, which is registered with the medical body over there, your English exam should be valid.
Okay.
Yeah, so I gave the AMC 1, I gave the English competency, then I appeared for the AMC clinical, which was roughly 8-9 months after my AMC 1. And during that time, during that same convention pathway, AMC 1, AMCQ, and AMC clinical, I applied for jobs widely, and after a lot of rejections, I did get a job as a junior doctor.
Okay. So, okay, and now currently you are
So currently
currently you are still.
yes, so I'm still working. I'm in pre-vocational training there in Australia as a PGY3. Okay, and we'll get PGY3, which is another terminology. But right now I'm doing in that training, and the next year I get on to the specialist training, which is another different thing.
So the special training, like I can say, it means that you'll be starting your residency training, right?
Yes, that would be that residency training which you start there. So just like in the UK and Australia, you do 1 or 2 years of pre-vocational years or junior clinical fellow years or non-training jobs,
Okay.
and then you get on to that training specialty, be it medicine, emergency medicine, psychiatry, GP, and etc.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're watching from India, it would be analogous to having a JR-ship after your internship
Yes,
before giving or sitting for your NEETPG and starting a PG or residency.
that's right.
So technically, this JR-ship is kind of compulsory in Australia and UK, not compulsory in India. So you're doing this JR-ship, and I think you're almost at the end of it, and you'll be starting the specialist or the residency training in Australia. Okay, so let's talk more about these exams. So you said you took AMC 1 and then 8, 9 months after AMC clinical along with the English exam. So tell me more about it, and let's maybe contrast it with, let's say, USMLE or even NEETPG for people watching in India. But mainly because, like, I went to the USMLE pathway to the US, or not, I didn't go yet, but that's what I'm in. And you have gone to Australia. So let's compare and contrast, how these two things are similar and different from each other. So tell me about your experience. How much time did it take to prepare for these AMC exams? What are the syllabus? What do you have to study? What are the resources? What is the cost, etc.? And I'll chip in with comparing it with USMLE.
Great, great, wonderful question. So I'll talk about both the exams, and both AMC 1 and AMC 2 have different subsections and niche. I'll then contrast it with NEETPG or PLAB, and also a bit of USMLE, and then you can add some few more tips and
Yeah,
dive deep into the USMLE pattern.
sure.
So with AMC 1 and AMC 2, let's talk about finances first, how much money you need to invest in addition to the resources. So both AMC 1 and AMC 2 as of today is $3,000 Australian dollars and 4,200 Australian dollars respectively, just for the exams, which comes out to about 7,000 Australian dollars. Again, summing up to at least 3.75 to 3.8 lakhs Indian rupees. This is just for the
Okay.
examinations, post step of the examinations, let's say taken over a year or year and a half. The preparation, the resources and preparation for step one, for AMC 1, it's not actually step, it's just AMC 1. So AMC 1 MCQ, for the resource, it'll roughly take you about $600, 600 to 700 American dollars or Australian dollars even, because why I'm using American dollars, because the question banks prices are actually in American dollars, which is weird.
Like, what's the difference between the dollar rate, like
Right.
currently, if you know, like,
So Australian dollar, $1 is 55.5 Indian rupees, and American dollar, I believe one American dollar, and don't quote me on this, please.
is
It's
around 80,
it,
around 80, 84, 85, I
yes,
don't know,
yes,
something around that
yes.
range.
The
So like maybe one Australian dollar is like kind of 60, 70%
yes,
of
yes.
an American dollar.
Yes, and the
Okay.
not surprising part is the Australian dollar doesn't appreciate as fast as the American dollar does. So you end up spending less Indian rupees when you want to book for these exams, resources, or let's
Yeah.
say courses in Australia. So for preparation part, you will require for AMC 1 another 600, 700, say Australian dollars. And for AMC 2, it's very variable. There are a lot of coaching institutes out there, but to give you a rough figure, it's about 1,500 Australian dollars. This is again not accounting for travel, because AMC Clinical is predominantly now in Melbourne, only held in Melbourne, just like how PLAB 2 is held in Manchester in the UK. It's only held in Melbourne. So let's say I'm accounting another 1,500 Australian dollars for travel and accommodation.
Okay.
The timeline would be, so I took both the exams in roughly a year and a half. 6 to 7 months for AMC 1 is sufficient with work. I'm talking with work, with internship or with JR-ship
Okay.
work back in home country. So let's say
Okay.
4 or 5 hours of dedicated study every day. And for AMC clinical, it varies. It can take as short as, let's say, as short as 5 months to as long as 10 to 11 months. Again, with
Okay.
work, all of it with work. Yes, but with AMC Clinical, you need to fly down to Melbourne and you need to dedicate that 1 month for coaching there or role playing over there just before the exam. That's it about the finances and the resources part.
What's the, like, the what comes in AMC 1? Are the clinical subjects, preclinical subjects? What's the course like?
Right. So in terms of the syllabus, it's very similar to PLAB 1. Your final year subjects or your core subjects make up to 80-85% of the syllabus, which is your medicine, your surgery,
Okay.
your gynecology, your pediatrics, your psychiatry, your ethics, and public health. Public health of Australia. They make about 80-85% of syllabus. Rest of them is a bit of biostats, a bit of dermatology, a bit of ENT and ophtha. The pattern is
Okay.
very similar to PLAB 1. And the syllabus for AMC clinical, it's a pure it's a pure OSCE station exams. You have 16 OSCE stations, all of which test you in these following subjects. Again, medicine, pediatrics, obs gynae, psychiatry, ethics, and physical examination part, where you have a time constraint. Within that particular time, you need to perform a history, give a management counsel about a certain part of the diagnosis, and give your differential diagnosis.
Okay. Which is similar to the PLAB too.
Yes, it is. It's similar,
Yeah.
but the PLAB 2, from what I have gathered, is a lot lenient compared to AMC Clinical. AMC Clinical
Okay.
standards the question stems are similar. The question difficulties are similar to PLAB 1. I'd say even easier than PLAB 2, but the marking is very strict. The marking and the leniency is very
Okay.
low. The marking is very strict. The standards are a bit high, and they require you not just to deliver good medical knowledge, but also very high and thorough on your communication skills, your ethics, how you're delivering a news, what your presentation is towards, let's say, a pediatric
Yeah.
patient or a elderly geriatric patient.
Like bedside manners.
Yes,
They
yes,
they they
yes.
focus more on bedside
A
manners.
lot, a
Okay.
lot. Yeah.
So yeah. So basically, AMC 1 has the clinical subjects, which would make it more similar to USMLE Step 2 exam, because USMLE Step 2 is the one which is more clinical. It has, again, obsgyn, psychiatry, and all the subjects you already talked about in AMC Part 1. And so basically, USMLE Step 1 is an exam in itself. There's no exam which I found comparable to it, because it's just preclinical subjects. We have like our Indian exam, NEETPG, which has everything. We have PLAB and AMC Part 1 both, which have the clinical one. We have USMLE Step 2, which is also the clinical one, and we have Step 1, which is USMLE Step 1, which is just the preclinical subjects, although asked in a clinical way. So yeah, kind of similar. So AMC2, you took after 8 to 9 months. So did you go through any coaching in Australia before that? Would you recommend that, or like just your experience through resources and experience maybe as a JR or an intern in your back in your home country is enough? Or maybe you need that 1 month of experience in Australia before sitting for the exam? What do you feel like?
Yeah, so a great question. My experience with AMC Clinical was not very fond because I actually failed it on the first two attempts. But yes,
Okay.
yeah. But the good part was that I got a job in Australia based on my AMC 1, my English competency, and I had a very stellar experience and CV with a good profile. So for my AMC clinical, the numerous attempts after AMC, after the first attempt of AMC clinical, I was able to fund myself because I was already had a working job in Australia, which was paying me all right. In terms of
Yeah.
my experience, I think 6 to 8 months of core studies was enough, which can be broken down into 5 6 months of study with your internship or with your JR-ship in your home country, and 1 year of exclusive studies in Australia, in Melbourne. The exams were online this year in 2024 up till now, up till November. So a lot of people were able to sit in their rooms in whichever country they were able to give the exam. So the travel cost and this dedicated 15 days to 1 month period was saved. But now I would recommend 5 6 months of dedicated period with the JR-ship and 1 month of dedicated period in Australia, doing a 1 or 2 weeks course. So I did. This is what I did. 5 6 months of experience of studies, intense studies with role playing, active role playing. There was less of studying
Yeah.
from the resources and more of role playing. Just like how we are meeting, we used to talk about clinical cases. We used to have the timer on,
Yeah.
and within those 8 minutes, you have to finish. Let's say you're given a
Yeah.
task, and within those 8 minutes, you have a history taking part, and you have a differential and diagnosis part. So just how we are discussing, I used to discuss my study partners. And my last 1 or 2 months was in Melbourne, where I took a 2 week rapid clinical course a week before my exam, and then I appeared for the exam.
Okay, so you're saying this clinical exam, AMC clinical, was online for some time up till now?
It was online this year because the AMC Clinicals contract with their center got over in Melbourne, so they had to basically shut down
Okay.
their center. And because they shut down this center, they couldn't stop these exams from conducting because a
Oh,
lot of candidates are waiting for the exam. So they transitioned it to an online exam this year in 2024 From next year onwards, from 2025, it's becoming face to face again because they have that new center in Melbourne.
Okay.
But with that being said,
Yeah.
they have also mentioned that they may have some slots, about 10 to 15 slots for online exams as well, for information which is yet to
Okay.
come.
Okay. So let's dive a bit deeper into these exams. So, what resources did you use for your AMC Part 1 exam? Let's talk about that. Like, did you use your standard books from your med school, or I don't know, from Indian resources, or Australian resources, or even USMLE resources? So, what helped you prepare for this exam well?
Right. For AMC one, I used my final year medical knowledge was really fresh, so that really helped. In addition to that, I used some resources which I basically wrote myself and accumulated myself. In
Okay.
addition to that, there were two question banks which I had used. One is known as Amidex question bank. Another one is M plus X question bank. Used them for about roughly 6-7 months with 2 to 3 passes. In the last 1 month or so, I just did mocks. So I roughly did about 15 to 25 mocks, which simulated the exam pattern. I think 200 questions, 3.5 hour exam. And that was
So
in,
these mocks are also available on these question bank websites, or is there a separate one, or AMC official has some mocks or something?
no, these mocks are all available on these two question banks, which I talked about, and
Okay.
they're readily available. So, and there were some resources which I used, which I prepared myself. For AMC Clinical, again, some resources which I accumulated from the coaching center. And AMC Clinical was more of role playing and more of discussing cases,
Yeah. Hands-on.
clinical cases like bedside clinical cases, less of studying and less of extensive reading. So it was more of role play. And the last 1 month, I took a rapid 2 week course at a coaching center in Melbourne called Alan Roberts. I used them, did more of role playing, found more people to role play with, and gave the exam.
Okay. Let's talk more about the score. Does score matter? Is it pass fail? Is the score reported? And if it is reported, like what's the weightage on that? If you get a stellar score, are you at an advantage in some way? Or if you don't get a stellar score but still pass, are you at a disadvantage? And in that case, can you retake an exam? For example, in NEETPG, if someone passes the exam but does not get the branch or seat in their desired field or college, they can always reappear in the next attempt. Whereas contrasting it with USMLE, if you pass the exam, that's it. That score sticks with you for your whole life. There's nothing you can change that. So how is it for Australia? Is it scored? Is it not scored? How can you reattempt it? And when can you take the exam also? Like, can you take it any time of the year, or do they open slots for once a year, twice a year, or something like that?
Sure. So, uniquely interesting question, Subhav. So, for AMC, there is no weightage on the score, no weightage at all. It's just a
Oh,
pass-fail exam. So, both the exams, they haven't put any weightage on the score, nor do they ask for scores in the job profile in the application where you're applying to. So, as opposed to
okay.
NEETPG or USMLE, there's even though the score is reported for both the exams, but there's no such weightage on that.
Okay, so you do get a score, but it's of no value. Like a person who's getting full marks and a person who has passed the exam but not with full marks, they are weighed equally.
Yes, they are. So, for an example, AMC Clinical has 14 stations, 14 scored stations. A candidate who has passed 14 stations as opposed to a candidate who has passed the exam with 10 stations, and that's the passing requirement. Now it's changed to 9. They are both rated and both are weighed equally on job profile. No difference at all.
Same for AMC Part One.
Yes, same for AMC Part 1.
Okay, that's great to hear. So how do they like, let's say you were applying for jobs yourself. If everyone who's applying for a job has cleared the AMC exams, how do they decide which person or which candidate to even consider for the job? Let's say if 1,000 people have applied, like let's say I want to interview these 100 out of these 1,000, and out of these 100 I want to take 10. Like what's the criteria they use? Like what else can you improve in your CV, that if the scores are weighed equally?
Yeah, great question. So, in addition to the AMC and the English exam that makes you eligible to apply for jobs, and a lot of people are applying, then it all comes down to your CV, your cover letter, your selection criteria, and your experience back in home country. So,
Okay.
experience back in home country is of grand importance when you're applying for jobs in Australia. Even 3, 4 years of experience in, let's say, medicine or emergency medicine or ICU in India is taken more favorably as opposed to 1 year experience in emergency medicine or medicine in India. That's one skill, that's one valuable part. In addition to that, it's very good to have a good research profile on your CV, good CPD activities, which are continuing professional development activities, specifically signed up with the Australian healthcare system. Nowadays, there's a good importance for observerships as well. And why the observerships are important are basically in two aspects. First is you get a first-hand, the recruiters know that you have a first-hand experience of the Australian healthcare system, and you know how the patient demographics, population are, what the common
Yeah.
pathologies, and what the hospital working is. Second, it can give you an Australian consultant's reference on your CV. So any consultants working in
Okay.
Australia, they can agree to be your reference on the CV. So when you're applying for jobs, they know, okay, so there's an Australian reference on the CV. So it's easy to
Oh,
just call them up or email them and just get a better hand of the candidate.
okay. So all these kind of things help. So one thing I noticed, you were saying like the more experience you have, the better, which uh, which is good. Like as opposed to, let me again contrast it with USMLE. USMLE pathway, like they generally tend to prefer more fresh graduates, people who have passed maybe medical school maybe in the last 3 to 5 years, not more than that. I mean, of course there are people matching with 15 years of graduation, but it takes a significant effort in that aspect. Like the more fresh graduate you are, I think the better chances you have to match in US, versus I think in AMC, the more experience you have, I think the better chance you have to land a job. Am I right in this
Yes.
statement, or?
Yeah, you've
Okay.
summed up. You summed up well. Also, in Australia, they look at your work rights as well. So let's say there's someone who's moved to Australia with their partner, with their spouse, or whatever. By virtue of that, they have work rights. So they're also looking for someone who has, someone, let's say, who has work rights, who's already in Australia, probably doing an MPH, a Master of Public Health, or someone who's
Okay.
gone there as a spouse. They automatically get work rights. And let's assume they are also someone who've done the AMC1 and MCQ examination. They are automatically ranked
They
higher
would.
up than us because they have work rights, and the
Got
Australian
it.
hospitals know they don't have to go through the visa process or sponsor this doctor for a
Okay.
visa thing and spend extra money because this doctor is already in Australia. They're doing whatever they are doing, but they've got work rights.
Yep. Same. I think it's similar for each country. Like
Mm.
even in US, if you have a green card or if you have a work permit because of your spouse or something else, you will be
Yeah.
interviewed first of all more, and you will be ranked higher because again the hospital won't have to go through that visa process. I think that's same for everyone.
Yeah.
So I think that's about it for AMC exams. Do you have anything to add about the exams before we move to our next section about life in Australia?
No, I think that's pretty much sums it up. And yeah, the most important nugget of information I give everyone is people who ask me if you're eligible for applying for jobs after AMC1. Yes, you are, but your likelihood of getting shortlisted and being recognized is
Is
50,
no.
60% higher after AMC clinical examination. So do not delay that.
Okay.
AMC clinical is a very, very, very important part of your whole Australia journey via the standard pathway.
Okay. So, like, main point, you would recommend people to take these exams as soon as possible and also continue their work in their home country to build up that experience in CV, because, as you said, the scores don't matter. So, you need something else other than the scores, because everyone who's applying has passed these exams. So, what else you bring to the table? So, you need to continue working. Maybe how does research play in it? Like, do they have a big weightage on research? Someone with a more academic profile with a lot of publications, is that person preferred, or research or no research doesn't really matter?
that person is certainly preferred, but it's not a vital prerequisite as it's in the US. I know US is very big on research, and they value a lot of research
Yeah.
activity, not just in US but in your home country as well. So a short answer, no. Australia is not very big on research, but they like to have that subsection in your CV
Uh,
to just to get a more all-round experience of what a doctor you are.
okay.
Because let's say you don't have AMC clinical and you're applying just for the AMC or IMC, you need a few subsections on your profile
Yeah.
to make you stand out, and that's where research
Okay.
comes in play.
Okay. So just again summing it up, we'll need around 1.5 to 2 years to complete both these steps. You'll need to be working while you do that, and you'll need something other than these exams to enhance your profile maybe and land a job in Australia. And that's about it. So let's say we've done all that and we landed in Australia. So tell me more about the life in Australia. How is it? How are the working hours? How's the money? For sure, I think people are waiting for that. And yeah, would you consider living your whole life there, or is something that is good for an experience and like you want to take that experience back to your home country?
Yeah.
What is it like? Everything.
Great. So with terms of experience, to each its own. In terms of living, yeah, it's really great. The Australians are the country itself, and Australians are they love their work-life balance aspect, and they take that very seriously. If you're off or if you're off call and you're done with your duty, you're off. Nobody's going to call you or going to bicker with you a bit. You have standard 40 to 48 hours work week. In addition to that, if you do if you pick up some extra duties, some locums, or let's say you do overtime, you tend to you bound to finish at 5:30, you stay up till 6:30, you can always clock in that extra overtime and you'll be paid for it. I know some of my colleagues who stay 15 or 20 minutes extra and still book that 1 hour overtime just to get that extra money, which is not needed, but they still do it. And the HR people are quite lenient about it. They pay you well. The taxes are way quite high, much higher, much higher than the Indian subordinate part for sure. You can tell me a bit about the US part. I'm sure it's high there as well. The life's
Yeah.
good in terms of lifestyle. It's a lot of open spaces. The weather's much better than how it's in the UK, in whichever part of Australia you are, especially not in the Northern Territory, Darwin, or let's say Queensland. They get a bit humid and a bit extreme. But otherwise, in Victoria, New South Wales, Western Australia, a bit few parts of Queensland, the weather's really good. In terms of living, in terms of working academically, it's rewarding. Certainly you get paid well, you have opportunities for research. In addition, you want to do some teaching roles within the hospital, you want to do some research roles in the hospital, that will be taken care of. You'll be well supported. Let's say you're as a junior doctor, you're going on nights for the first time, you're doing 5 consecutive or 4 consecutive nights for the first time. You will be supported, your feedback will be taken. Were you managing okay? And let's say you were not
Okay.
managing fine, they'll politely take you off the nights without any kind of a malice or any uh, benevolent gesture. And
Okay.
yes, the most important part, the money is really good.
The money.
The money. So the experience in after taxes, I'll quote the figure after taxes, and you are taxed 35 to 40% in Australia. After taxes per month, you get about 6,000 to 6,600 or 6,700 Australian dollars a month, which roughly amounts to 3.5 lakhs Indian rupees. And the experience is fantastic, and with experience, again, to each its own. You can either continue to staying there. If you have a partner, you make a partner, and it's a great place for your kids to grow up. Secondly, you can always bring back that experience back to your home country. You'll come back with stronger
Yeah.
communication skills, stronger ethics, and just a bit of different perspective to medical practice.
Okay. So again, this was a great answer, to be honest. But how is life with that amount of money in Australia? Is it okay? Is that considered good amount of money in Australia, or is that considered like okay, yeah, like you'll be fine. You'll not be short of money, but you cannot be like splurging money as well. How is it? Because every country has their own spending power, purchasing power parity. I'm sure you know about that. Like for example, if you want to buy groceries in India, if the salaries are cheap, you will also have an option or a place where you can get cheap groceries. So similarly, like people earn more in US, but also things are more expensive in US. So how is it in Australia? Is that amount of money uh, earning like a junior doctor earns? Is that enough? Or is that enough for two people, or for one person, or for a family? How is it like?
Yeah, well-rounded question. So it's higher than the average income. It's much higher than the average income, but again,
Okay,
it's lower than the high income bracket in Australia, which mostly the businessmen or let's say the real estate people are into. But you're able to save generously. Let's say with one person, I was able to save around 1,500 to 1,200 Australian dollars, roughly amounts to a lot. With two people also, let's say your partner is not working there, you're not working, you can save about 600 to 700 Australian dollars every month and do whatever you want to do
okay,
with it, either invest or keep it in your savings account.
okay.
That is with respect to grocery. I think grocery and your rent takes up majority of your salary chunk in Australia.
Majority.
There are not a lot of cheap grocery options in Australia as how it's in the US. There are these 4 5 set markets from where you have to buy. If there's an offer, there's an offer. Good on you. But if there's no offer, then you've got to buy those groceries, and it really pinches sadly the rent part, and the rental incomes are very high, much higher, even much higher than the US counterparts. There are not a lot
Wow.
of sharing options as well, so you need to you need to be on rent, and the rental income and groceries take a huge chunk of our application. This rental is excluding the electricity, the bill, the other ancillary stuff. But
Okay.
even after all that, even after all these expenses, you can save, and you can increase your savings holding by taking up more shifts if it's up to your capability,
Yeah.
doing more locums or taking up, let's say, doing extra overtime of 4 5 hours every week. That would be that's an avenue for you to basically earn more and save more, if you especially if you're splurging, or you have a splurging
Yeah.
month where you're traveling and doing other recreational activities. You
Yeah.
can always compensate.
Okay. And what about salary when you become, or when you are in training, and what about after that? So I'm hoping it increases after that, but what about in training? Is it the same as this JR ship, or it increases or it decreases?
It's a slightly more. It's not more by a significant much. It's slightly more. So let's say you'll be earning about $1,000 or 1,300 Australian dollars more in training, and that goes on to advanced training as
Per
well.
month?
Per month, yes. Per
Per,
month you can earn
per
about
month.
1,000
Okay.
or let's say $1,500 more per month. But as a consultant, it increases proportionately. Again, it depends on your on-call hours, on your on-week hours, but you have this fixed
Yeah.
40 to 44 hours work week. With consultant, on a consultant level, it does increase 2 to 2.5 times roughly. And yeah, that's the estimated increase. But again, it depends on your roles, whether you're in one hospital, whether you're, let's say, attached to a clinic as well. So yes.
Okay. Okay. I have a very weird question from you, because whenever I thought of, shifting to Australia and practicing medicine, I like, before even going into what exams do I have to take, or even if I'm eligible, I always used to think, damn, man, Australia has these weird animals, weird insects. How would I deal? Like, I don't want to live like in my house a snake coming in, or my house is full of spiders. Like, before even thinking about the exams, I always thought, man, Australia, no, never an option for me. I cannot handle the variety they have. So what is it like? Like, you've lived there for, I think, 3 years. Have you had some encounters with some creatures you never see here? And what is it like?
I did anticipate this question very early on, and I did get to know this when you used the word interesting question. So in terms of encounters, yes, I had an encounter with a garden lizard or monitor lizard, which is nothing but a garden lizard. It looks very dangerous. It's a large lizard which looks very dangerous. It was on my curb, but it's nothing. And in terms
How
of
large are we talking?
well, how large? Let's say a size of a table. Let's say a size of your dining table. Yeah,
A size
a
of a
dining table.
dining
Yeah,
table,
a
a
slightly
lizard.
smaller dining table. Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah, you it does, this botany life, it does come into your mind when you think of Australia. One of my friends also had the same notion that never Australia because of the lizards, spiders, and everything. But they are less in the metropolitan cities, like not in Perth, Melbourne, or Sydney. They are more in those outback areas, like more regional. You go, more you encounter them. But the good part is 85, or let's say no, 95% of them are non-poisonous, non-dangerous,
Harmless.
but they're just out there. So while you continue to be living there, you will get used to encounter such wildlife and not be surprised by it. Oh yeah, so I saw this and I just walked past it, and it's very common. It's even very common among international medical graduates who've been working there or recently worked there. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because I always think, whenever I think of Australia, I'm like, snakes, spiders, kangaroos,
yeah,
snakes,
yeah,
spiders, kangaroos. That's what I see.
yeah,
And Chris Hemsworth.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, anything else you want to touch about life in Australia, living in Australia? How's the experience been for you? Have you enjoyed your time there? Have you faced any struggle living there, uh, apart from working?
That was pretty much it in terms of struggles. There initially, obviously, there are teething problems, and you have a big cultural shock going from Mumbai or tier one cities in India, because Australia is a very suburban place. It's usually quiet. It's not very lively after evenings or nighttime, and something like a nightlife, which we often see, it's pretty much not very prevalent here. One thing I want to talk about, I want to just briefly mention it, is the racism part, which a lot of people ask, and a lot of people do have this
Yeah.
notion before venturing on to Australia with any job, not just medical field, that there's racism there. But there's nothing like that. I never encountered it, and I don't think my colleagues have also encountered it as well. There is subtle racism in every field towards IMGs or towards foreign grads, but there's nothing like that here. There are certain fields where IMGs have a disadvantage. This is basically surgical, obs, gynae, and dermatology, and they attribute that we are not getting those places because there is racism. But that's not the case. I would like to dispute and debunk that. That's mainly because Australia in general has very less seats in these surgical fields, and it's less amenable than UK or USA towards IMGs. It's never been a hotspot for IMGs
Okay.
until the recent times. So because of that less seats,
Yeah.
because of those less seats, they have uh, those seats go to the foreign medical graduates. Sorry, those seats go to the Australian medical graduates itself.
Don't go to. Yeah.
Yes, they don't go to
Okay.
foreign medical graduates because there is so less demand. Though less demand there, as a result, there's less supply as well. So that's one important thing. If
Okay.
people who want to trend down this pathway, want to do something like a neurosurgery or an orthopedics or etc., or let's say dermatology, these are very competitive fields, which is most likely gonna go to the Australian medical counterparts, and it has nothing to do with racism. Absolutely nothing to do with racism.
Okay.
Another
Okay.
important thing I
Okay.
like to bring
That's,
back,
I think,
yeah,
similar in US.
yes, the work
Like,
ethic
it's
is
nothing to
good.
do with racism. Like, these fields are just
Yeah,
competitive. They are, in one way or the other, more desirable to the people living there, so the competition increases. And if, I don't know, if a field or if a hospital has all amazing and competitive candidates, they will, I can understand, they would choose their own, where they don't have to sponsor a visa or something, and and people who have experience and of their med school in their own country. So yeah, it's just a competitive field, just like, I think, US. Nothing to, you know, nothing to for racism or anything. It's just how it is. It's competitive. Yeah. Okay, I think that's about it. Life for of an IMG in Australia, and I wish you best of the luck for your next chapter in Australia in the specialist training. And I hope you get into whatever training you're hoping to get into, and may you, help guide your fellow students who also want to practice medicine in Australia. And for that, I think I'll have a link to Dr. Divij's socials down below in the description. You can reach out to him on LinkedIn and X or Twitter, and I think he'll be happy to help you out. And yeah, if you have any other questions, drop them down in the comment section below. And I have one interesting question. What's the capital of Australia? It's not Sydney. So tell me if you've watched this far. Yeah.
Great
On
question.
that note, I think we'll end this podcast. Thank you, Dr. Divij.
Thanks a lot. Wonderful to be on your session, and good luck for the match.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.